Hello, I'm your host, David Newson, and welcome to Coded in Gold. This podcast explores the fractured, beautiful pieces of our modern life through compelling stories and conversations with exceptional individuals. Let's get started. Welcome. On today's episode of Coded in Gold, you'll hear my conversation with Joel Farriss and Chris Everett to discuss their work at the Holon Institute and the new series of events they've been hosting called the Poly Opportunity. You might be asking yourself, what is a poly opportunity? With a million connotations coming to mind. What I learned through our conversation is that this is sort of the heart of what we've been talking about on this podcast and so much more. We all know that there are lots of complicated, interconnected issues that make modern life rather difficult. It seems impossible sometimes to actually untangle it all. Chris and Joel seek to begin the untangling process by bringing together experts from all disciplines, from dancers and poets to scientists and entrepreneurs. Their hope is that we may find answers from unexpected sources. I know this might sound a little woo-woo at times, but there are beautifully simple and concrete pieces of advice in this conversation that you don't want to miss. Let's jump now into my conversation with Chris and Joel. But let's begin with like where we all met. Joel, you're new in my orbit. Chris has been a staple in my orbit for some time. So maybe Chris, maybe you can kind of tell the story of like how we all got here today.
I would be happy to. David and I both participated in a really remarkable program provided by Larissa Conte called Alchemical Leadership. Mm-hmm. This was back in 2020 for me. I think you went through it in maybe 21?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, mm-hmm. Which feels like a million years ago. But it was a really extraordinary program, maybe 4 months long, and actually perfect for that time period. It was done remotely, and it was a period. She used the metaphor, the Russian nesting dolls, that we were going in and down to the tiny little peanut, and then building with a new orientation to yourself and how you work and the stories that you carry, building yourself back up so that it is an alchemical process of the kind of both leader and human that you want to be in the world. And so we were introduced through that remarkable community at that time. You and I became friends through conversation, and then Joel and I met at the House of Beautiful Business. David, I know you and I have talked a lot about that.
Yes, indeed.
And just an extraordinary community of people. Some of my most meaningful relationships, both collaborations and friends, have come out of this community in moments where you meet someone and it's like, oh, well, there you are, a long lost brother, and we're finally just getting to catch up. And Joel and I were in Sintra, Portugal, and we were on a lawn over lunch. We just by chance happened to sit with each other and dove down a deep rabbit hole, wonderful conversation, all of these just tendrils of similarities, interests, curiosities, language, and it was quite remarkable. We lost track of each other after lunch, and I thought for sure I'm going to see Joel again. We'll run into each other certainly over the next couple of days, and we didn't. And I had a notebook where I was keeping names and relationships and kind of interest areas, and I didn't even know what his name was, but that simple interaction really stuck with me. And I was very bummed because I didn't know where he lived. I didn't even know where to begin kind of searching. And so I kind of released it. And maybe 6 months later, the House of Beautiful Business hosted an online gathering to introduce the next year's theme and events. and there were a couple of hundred people on the call, I think. And the theme was in between. They were doing two events, and what happens in the liminal spaces and what happens between conversations and events. And they invited us to go into a breakout room with other people to explore the idea of the in-between. And Joel and I were thrown into the room by ourselves during the breakout. And it was one of those,
Wow.
wait, it's you. There you are. And we exchanged contact information and picked up the thread of the beautiful conversation back in from Sintra. And there's an idea that I feel deeply with Joel, and I also feel deeply with you too, David. Joel introduced this idea of the spiritual murmuration, that there are people that you meet that are following this flow of calling or ideas or passion, that you realize, oh my gosh, we're all following the same flow. We have been called in a similar direction. And the dreams that Joel and I had been following and wanting to manifest were singing the same song. And it was kind of extraordinary to say, oh, we get to join in the music together, because we've both been called forward in that way. And I know, David, you and I have followed some similar spiritual murmurations as well.
That's fantastic. For our audience, I want to contextualize this just a little bit, because and I wrote down some things like, you're using words like calling, ideas, and passion, and this is a conversation today that we're having that is deep for me. It comes from a deep place within, which is unusual, right? It's not, Coated in Gold certainly has within it space for this. But as I'm reflecting back so far on some of the interviews that we've had, this one steps into a space that's a little bit different, and I want to kind of position why a little bit, right? So it's no secret. I've talked about it before. I'm a TEDx organizer. I've attended big TED events. I actually met Tim after he had written his book, The House of Beautiful Business. And then he went on to form an organization, the House of Beautiful Business. And I bumped into him at the airport on his way to the TED event where he gave his first TED talk about, this whole idea of his that he was having at the time. And I bumped into him in the airport, and I was just like, oh my goodness, you must be Tim. Like, you must be headed to TED. Like, you're one of the reasons I'm here. I want to see you, right? And so it was very, very interesting. And even his book, I think at the end, he left it like, hey, reach out if you're interested in this thing called the House of Beautiful Business. And I think what he actually hadn't contemplated originally was that that was a tongue-in-cheek request in the book, right? He wasn't actually planning like to build this thing called the House of Beautiful Business. It was more of an idea. It was more of an ethos that he was inviting people into. And then I think he had like so many inbound messages, like incomings, where he was just like, oh, there's probably something here. Wow. And out from that original, well, I mean, it was a big idea. It was encapsulated in his book. And then what grew out of that was an organization called the House of Beautiful Business, and then in-person events that started being held around the world, right? And so it was interesting. I know the first time, Chris, you and I spoke, we connected on this, what the House of Beautiful Business is, or, is, and what it can be, because it is an idea. And it magnetizes a certain group of people who are very interested in doing things a little bit differently than we have previously contemplated as either business people or entrepreneurs, or, whatever we want to call ourselves. And And then certainly like how we met through alchemical leadership, I was on this quest for sure, really trying to get to the source of my leadership style. Like, what type of a leader am I? Am I a leader? Am I an entrepreneur who likes to make things? Like, who am I really? And that program really started asking questions that previously I had contemplated, but didn't really know how to bring them into being. So, for example, I think it was the first time I had ever gone through an exercise. And one of those very early exercises was like, okay, make a list of activities and rate them on how alive it makes you feel, right? And I remember the first time seeing a spreadsheet like that, I thought, what are you talking about? I feel like I'm reading a foreign language. Like, I don't know what you're actually asking of me. And then as you kind of progressed into, and Larissa did a phenomenal job at this, kind of like bringing you along a quest or a path towards this self-discovery, both from a leadership style, but really a deep-rooted sense of like, who am I? And knowing and understanding that and doing it in a group setting of other, what should we call heart-centered leaders, is another good term. But I also remember I felt like I was learning a new language. And so I'm cognizant of people listening to this or watching this where they're like, what are you guys talking about today? Right. And I just want to acknowledge, like, the first time you step into, and you also mentioned liminal spaces. When I was originally contemplating the name for this podcast, we arrived at Coded in Gold, or I arrived at Coded in Gold, but like as I was sketching out the first couple of episodes, I really wanted to do an episode just on maybe the whole theme of the whole thing is really about liminal spaces, because there's something about the in-between spaces. And just for everyone, like, the first time I heard liminal spaces, I had to go look it up. Like, oh my gosh, like what? Like, am I at some, like cult retreat, like being indoctrinated? Like, I got to go like look this up. And so, but what I learned is like, okay, liminal spaces are just spaces in between, right? And when you invite yourself into a space of like, okay, well, how else can I think of liminal spaces? Liminal spaces could be like big transitions in life, right? So from being, I think of my own, those liminal spaces are like, I was single and then I was married, right? There's liminal space in there. There's space from being like, okay, a partnered couple to like having your first child. There's these in between spaces. There's the space in between of, people changing jobs. Like, if you're, moving between careers or just JOBs, for example. And so you hit on a couple of those things, but like the alchemical leadership thread. So House of Beautiful Business, Ted. Okay. We then come into alchemical leadership. You and I meet. We connect on the House of Beautiful Business thread, and then we keep our dialogue going. And I learn a lot of things about you, right? Like, you and your partner run this amazing farm, right? And you invite artists to your farm every year. So tell me a little bit about, is it called Everwood?
It is called Everwood.
Okay.
Which is our two last names, Everett and Underwood.
Ooh, okay. I did not put that together.
I don't know if I'd ever mentioned that to you. Yeah. We purchased a 57-acre former dairy farm in western Wisconsin in the beautiful driftless zone. It's bucolic rolling hills here. When we first started looking for a place, and we honestly were just looking for like a vacation weekend home, it's completely ridiculous that we bought an entire farm.
Sometimes it happens like that, Chris.
I know. We literally bought the farm. But we started looking for land down in Pepin, far kind of southwest, and discovered the driftless zone and followed the driftless zone up. There was something about this land that just resonated in us. And and we, long story short, so we ended up purchasing this land. And one of the most extraordinary things that really drew us here is the barn itself. It was finished in 1914 at the beginning of the First World War. It is built of California redwood, which makes no sense because this was a logging town at the time, and nobody really knows how the wood got here. But it is the reason that the barn is in really extraordinary shape. We had to replace the roof when we first bought. It was just compromised, so we kind of got it at exactly the right time. But it is an extraordinary space, church-like space, and in many ways, we feel like the farm told us what it wanted, and we listened. We knew that something needed to happen around community in that space, whether it was art or music or people around a table having meals. Both of us have long backgrounds in the arts, working with arts organizations on arts boards. I'm an artist myself, a musician, painter, graphic designer. We know the power of art in community for bringing communities together. And that in nature, in that space, it just felt like there was something here to experiment with. And so we prototyped for the first 2 years. We offered events, invited neighbors, friends. We're just an hour from the Twin Cities. And so we have a beautiful mix of urban and rural audience members in the barn. Probably a lot of folks that wouldn't naturally know each other or even speak to each other on Facebook, and we're all in the room together. And after experimenting for the first 2 years, we knew what it wanted to be. We formed our arts nonprofit, built our board, and we're now entering our 14th season. We host
Wow.
performances in the barn, workshops, and we also host an artist residency during the summer. We'll have 32 to 34 artists, two at a time, staying in the original farmhouse, June through early October.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think
You
it's
bet.
important because I think what we all share here, and Joel will get to your story in just a minute. And you just said it, Chris. It's like there's this thing called community that is spoken of frequently. I hear the word a lot. I'm suspect most of the time when I hear it these days. It almost seems as though the more a person slash organization says it, maybe the more it's lacking potentially, right? Whereas, or maybe it's just one of those things that community is better shown than actually spoken about. But I think what's beautiful with what you've done at Everwood is creating community. And I love also what you said, like it was, you were bringing together folks that might not be speaking on Facebook. And then boom, here they are in person, face to face. And I know you've shared with me some of those stories, which are actually quite beautiful. All right, moving a little bit into Joel. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I met Chris, like Chris mentioned, in Sintra at the House of Beautiful Business event there.
Yep.
I've spent my entire career in the world of consulting, primarily in applied research and strategic futures. So I kind of have a transdisciplinary background in all things creative in terms of design, and I've worked with anthropologists, I've worked with MBAs, I've worked with biologists, I've worked with all sorts of people across all sorts of fields, really to think about human experience, especially at the intersection of society, technology, and business. And so, what does it look like to design for the various forces that are shaping our experience of the world? And what kind of inquiry needs to be conducted into that? And how do we translate inquiry into insight so we can apply that to our day-to-day lives and our businesses and the ways that we create value? So that's my professional background. Born and raised in California. I've lived in Washington, been in Seattle for the last See, going on about almost 15 years now. So Northwest now. Both my kids are born there. Love the Pacific Northwest, and it's a beautiful place to live. So that's a little bit about me.
What inspired this path for you?
So a few things. I mean, I think a big piece of it. It's interesting. The House of Beautiful Business is definitely a branch in our story. Chris mentioned the murmuration earlier, right? There's a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things through various expressions and organizational containers to address what we just understand today as, the complexity and disruption and ballistic acceleration of technology, and how all of that is creating incoherence and dislocation and all sorts of other challenges. And so in my consulting work, I spent the last decade working with visionary leaders to design the future during times of rapid transformation. And so looking at everything from a systems level and a granular level, right? And how do you design both of those things to work in concert with each other? It gave me a really interesting perspective on the forces that are driving change today and how humans, specifically business leaders, investors, entrepreneurs, how they're responding to those changes. And so I felt that at some point I hit a wall and a ceiling in regard to my ability to comprehensively work with leaders and teams and organizations to effectively address the forces of change and transformation within the constraints that I existed in. And so I stepped out to launch the Holon Institute
Okay.
in partnership with Tina Olson, Trace Bell, and Chris has recently joined our team as Chief Beauty Officer. So we really exist going back to the two kind of ideas that we were discussing around liminality and personal development. A liminal space is a threshold space, right? It's a space of tension. It is the in between two states of absolute. It's a super state. And so we believe that we collectively are living through a liminal time, that this century itself is a liminal space. It's a threshold moment for our species and for civilization writ large. And in many ways, we're the victims of our own success, right? If you think about, especially in the West, the prosperity, the wealth, the medicine, all of the technology, we've done really, really well. It's an amazing time to be alive. And that success has come with some unintended and unanticipated consequences. And so people are naming this the Polycrisis, or it's the Anthropocene, right? It's the long dark philosophically in some circles. And so the question becomes, well, how do you navigate it? How do you live through this time? How do you get to the other side of the liminal threshold? And so the Holon Institute really exists to help facilitate our collective pursuit of the answers to those questions.
What is the polycrisis?
The polycrisis is, if you break it down, right, it's a multitude of crises that are compounding the severity and the effect that each of those have. So, for example, um, anything that happens economically is also impacting things that are happening socially, that happens culturally, technically, right? You can kind of see there's a cascading collective nature to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can say that we can't go solve climate issues without also thinking about economic issues. But you also can't solve economic issues without thinking about climate issues. You can't solve technology issues without thinking about social issues. But you can't solve social issues without also thinking about technology issues. And so the polycrisis is really just the acknowledgement that we live in a wildly entangled world, that's very hard to pull one individual string out to solve one narrow problem without triggering ramifications and effects in a wide array of domains that exist outside of that singular problem. So that's the polycrisis is just a name for all the complexity and the interconnectedness and entangled nature of the world that we live in today.
That's a great way to put it. I want to jump to community again. Joel, how do you define community?
How do I define community? I think community can look very different for different people depending on their particular context and needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, for me, community is a small group of people who I know see me, love me, and can hold me accountable to my own becoming as a human. That's how
I
I
love
define
that.
community.
I love that.
And it's typically facilitated over meals and good wine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Chris, how about you? How do you define community?
I'm thinking about community these days in the context of the farm, of getting back to some basics, and for me, it feels like a remembering, a homecoming in some ways. In the barn, when we have this wildly diverse group of people and the diversity of their backgrounds, the diversity of the work that they do, their political beliefs, their religious beliefs, and we're all in the room. We're all in the room, and and music, of course, the art will do its work to help bring us together and mend us in some ways.
Mm.
But it is a sacred moment, and it needs to be held with some reverence and guided just a little bit. And so, before every single show, I offer a little experience design that is a reminder that we are more the same than we are different. It's a reminder of what it feels like to be a neighbor, to be a friend, to be a family member. So much of the social media and the news that we're taking in is divisive, in that it makes us want to believe that everybody is a cardboard cutout. You are this or you are that.
Mm.
And that is, in fact, not true. We are all profoundly complex. And I could go down a whole other rabbit hole with this, but in this moment, we're finding ourselves saying, how could you, how could you, how could you? And the question is not that, it is, what is it like to be you?
Mm.
We need to get back to this place of remembering each other's humanity. And there are small steps to that. And in that remembering of the humanity, and the diving into the complexity and reconnecting with the humanness of each other, that's how community starts to rebuild. And so some simple ways that that looks in the barn is even just a simple humming exercise. Science tells us that when you go to a concert, that by the end of the concert, our heartbeats are matched. Our neurons are matched. It's called synchrony. And when I was before a show, I was talking about the humming of the summer sun and the humming of the grass and the hum that is in the room when we're all together. And could we experiment and see if we could sync with each other before the concert rather than wait until after the concert?
Sure.
And so I invited people. I said, I know not everybody can sing, but we can all hum. So let's let out a hum and see if we can agree on a note just from listening to each other. And we did this, and in 20 seconds, we all agreed on a note. Then I said, could you please harmonize to that note? And we let out this beautiful chord. And so in less than 40 seconds, we had synced with each other. And it is a reminder that we are wired to be in sync with each other. And in many ways, we've just forgotten. And so over time, as people, we have to earn trust for people to be in the room. We have to create an incredibly safe container so everyone feels welcome. These little reminders of what it feels like to lean on each other, that we are connecting with each other, we're literally breaking bread with each other. Community starts forming, but I really believe that the community is our natural state, and we just have forgotten.
Mm.
Oh, that's so well said. And I also love this idea of designing experiences that people come into a space and getting folks synced before versus like waiting for, oh, there's this thing and then like it happens after. I actually love that. What do you think folks in their everyday lives, just going from meeting to meeting, for example, or from like work to home, or from like moving from place to place in the course of their day, what are some other things that they can do to sync, like to create that remembering that you're talking about? Do you have any other ideas? Because like
It, it,
I'm thinking about it myself. Like I know there was a time where I wanted to come into meetings, and you know, with Larissa, for example, and you'd always have like what she would call an arrival, right? And it's just like,
right.
okay, 3 deep breaths, 4 deep breaths, like a moment of silence. Like, what do you need to just like, you know, create space from what you were doing before and take some time to just kind of almost sync up together?
hmm Um, you will hear Joel and I talk a lot about mending separation,
Mm,
and this is a critical piece underneath this polycrisis. We are suffering a crisis of connection, and there are four separations that we talk about: separation with self, separation with others, separation with nature, and separation with mystery, which could be God, spirit, ancestors, the unknown, and and so in that crisis of connection, it begs the very question that you're asking: how can I connect more?
right.
How can I connect to the moment? How can I connect with others? How can I more deeply even connect with myself? Um, Beauty is one way in to that connection. When we experience beauty and awe and wonder, it is your body saying first, "Oh my gosh, there's something here. I need to lean in." It is that remembering that I was talking about before. It's just in us. There are all sorts of ways to call you into presence. One very simple way that the Holon group does every single meeting is a protocol called stringing the beads. This was taught from a medicine teacher of mine that guides ceremonies and gatherings based on Native American medicine teachings. It's a tradition that they hold. And the stringing of the beads is a beautiful idea that each of us is like an energetic bead. And before you ever start a meeting, how can we hold each other, hear all voices, and know how to support each other? And so we will go around the circle and you state your name, one at a time, state your name, where your feet are touching the ground, and then a simple question like, what is your current state? And
Mm.
when you're done, I've spoken, and then we have a word to say, aho, you have been heard. And if you take that 10 minutes and go around and hear, there is something about hearing everyone's name. I am Chris. My feet are touching the ground at Everwood Farmstead. I just got out of a really difficult meeting. I'm a little bit distracted. Happy to be here. Now, we've all been called in, we're all connected, and we know how to hold each other. Everybody knows that my heart is aching maybe just a little bit, or I'm a little anxious, or I'm unprepared, or
Mm.
whatever it is. And that 10 minutes is invaluable. I do it with our board meetings. I've done it in client meetings. It shifts the entire energy when we are gathered together, even just doing it with one other person.
Oh, that's fantastic. Um, okay, so you mentioned the Holon Institute and how you start meetings in this way, which I love. Tell me a little bit more about what is a Holon, for example. Like, let's just.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so a holon is something that is simultaneously a part and a whole. And
Mm,
so if you think about, the structure of what we understand to be reality, from the subatomic particle to the supermassive, galaxy or nebulas, that all of those things belong to things bigger than themselves and are containers for things smaller than themselves. So that's a holon, right? So the human body is holonic in the sense that we are a container for things that are much smaller than us. We have organ systems and we have molecules and cells that break down into proteins and other things, right? But we are also parts of families and parts of communities and parts of a species and part of a world that exists because we have a star, because we have gravity, because we have these other things that, right? And so a holon is just it's just that it's the part that's also a whole, it's also a part. So that's a holon.
oh, that's great. Um, and what's your vision for the Institute?
The vision for the Institute is to be an illuminator, right? So there's a lot of things that are changing in our world. And a lot of folks aren't necessarily fully, completely aware of all the things that are changing, even if they can feel the implications of the change, right? And so we believe that one of our big roles to play as a part of a much larger memorization of many others who are also playing similar roles is to illuminate where and how to navigate and live within the context of this change. And we have this kind of really, I think, wonderful model of moving from uh, you know, incoherence or complexity or confusion to understanding, and then from understanding to move to agency, and from agency to move to co-creativity, right? To actually, as a person, to be able to participate with the world around you, to shape the world in positive ways so that we can collectively create the world that we want to live in.
You touch on something that's like really important in there to me for sure, and I'm sure by extension a lot of people. And that is, I think we all feel it and we all know it. You mentioned like we're in this threshold moment, in the murmuration, and I'm also, thinking through and acknowledging like, okay, we can't be the only people. This must be happening writ large, like just about everywhere. I mean, it's certainly happening with everyone that I come in contact with, whether it's parents at my son's school or whether it's my family members. And it doesn't matter what political leanings there are. Like that's like, okay, it's just all of us. And we all kind of have this feeling. But I think what's also universal is that we almost feel like we don't know what to do either. It feels like a moment of paralysis
Mhm.
and and an unknowing of how to move forward.
That's right.
Um, so what do we do?
Yeah,
Like, how do we
that
get
is the
unstuck?
question.
How do
Yeah,
we,
yeah,
move through this
yeah,
time? How do we become like good stewards of,
yeah,
I don't know, our society, of our communities, of our, like I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good community member. I want to be a good husband. There's a lot of roles that I have, and I know there's
hmm,
lots of individual roles that lots of other people have, but how do we actually move forward?
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and there are many, many answers to that question. One of the answers that we believe in at Holon is that if you want to change the system, you have to change the story. And this is true whether it's the system that you have for getting up and out of bed in the morning, or it's the system that you have in place to run a multinational enterprise, right? That heuristic, that principle remains true. To change the system, you have to change the story. Now, you were talking earlier about the Leadership Alchemy program that you went through and how it really was provoking the question for you, David, who am I? Right? And so, what we believe is that we all have a story of who we are. We all have a story about what our role is in the world. And that when you walk through these programs like you did with the alchemy thing, and you're asked that question and you're confronted with things that maybe you haven't confronted before, what you end up discovering is that you've got halls you've never walked in your house. There are doors that have never been opened, right? And so if you think about the home of your personhood,
Mm.
sometimes these experiences introduce you to new corridors, new door. You get to discover a completely new bedroom. And now all of a sudden you've gained square footage in your personhood. The story of yourself expands, right? The aperture of your understanding of who you are gets bigger. And when you do that, it adds a new dimension to what you believe is possible in the world. It adds a new element to the system now that you can go create because you've got greater resource to apply.
That's right.
And so our whole thing is like, hey, if you want to do something, if you want to step into your agency, it starts with you. It starts with your story and the story that you tell yourself about who you are and what your role is in the world. And once you start that work, you can go now take action in a way that's aligned with your story. You can go design the system that is in line with your story, right? You can go create the practice that's built on your paradigm. So that's how we think about it. And then those things are reciprocal and they feed each other. And so in many ways, a lot of us, the reason that we don't have agency is because we believe that we can't change the system. That's just a story, right? And so that we're conditioned by our organization, or, I can't do anything in this company because my employer or my manager said, or whatever, or, we just got to keep investing this way, because if we don't keep investing this way, then, we're going to lose our investment. Or if we don't start this company this way, right? Those are just stories, right? It all operates within systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's an economic system, an organizational system, or a technological system, those are just systems that we've created out of stories. So I think recognizing that connection, and then beginning to ask yourself, how do I pivot my story or expand my story in a way that illuminates new opportunities and new could be's that otherwise didn't exist before. That's
And
our answer.
oh, very cool. And how would people practically do that?
I think there's a lot of ways to practically do that. I think, you asked earlier about ways that we could, I forget exactly what the question was, and Chris mentioned separation, and separation of self, others, nature, and mystery. One of the things that I talk about the most with my clients and the executive teams that I work with and the Holon works with is that, look, productivity and performance is a big thing always.
Mm-hmm.
And action orientation, right? And I say, look, I got to tell you the secret, but you gotta. This is a world changing secret. Are you ready for it? If you want to exponentiate your productivity, be still. That's it. Stillness. And I think what happens if you take a moment to be still, if you are completely undistracted, if you're not on a meeting, you're not doing email, you're not talking to somebody, pay attention to what happens to your mind and the just overwhelming flood of thoughts that appear. The reason that happens is because you're out of practice in stillness. It happens because those things are just waiting for that moment. And so that's also your story. All of the things that flood your mind in that moment of stillness, that is the skin of your story. That is it's the way that your story is projecting itself into your mind. And you have to kind of let that wave crash and let the waters calm. And until you've practiced stillness to where you can allow that wave to crash and you can get to the calm, it's going to be very difficult to adopt any other practice that's going to get you to the new paradigm or the new system.
That's really well said.
I'd be happy to offer too the framework of the drama triangle, which is known. The drama triangle being the victim, the hero, and the perpetrator. And in times when you are feeling stuck, and we see this, you're going to, once you see the drama triangle, you're going to see it everywhere. In the office, in your family, in the neighborhood, in those moments when you are feeling stuck, like, I don't know what to do, ask yourself, in this circumstance, am I the hero? Am I the perpetrator? Am I the victim of something? And the thing that is really interesting, often when we're trying to get out of it, we just end up moving to one of the other corners. Now I'm the perpetrator because I'm going to show them, and now I'm the hero because I'm trying to save everybody else. But the thing is, you just end up spinning. And when we talk about agency, it is the ability to step out of the drama triangle and examine the story that's going on. I'm not going to be any of these things, but what is happening here? What is really happening? What is the story that is going on, and what needs to be rewritten? I don't have to engage in any of those spaces. And so that is the agency to respond versus just react. Because when we're in the triangle, we're just reacting. And you want to pull it back in to say, what story is being told? What role am I playing in it? And what is possible? And that's the ability to now respond to it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think if I want, I'm sorry, David, I want to add one more
No,
thing
no,
to that, because
please.
I think this is really important. Like, it's critically important. It's a keystone element. That all of that is predicated on reflection, right? The ability to ruminate and reflect. And so just really practically, and I've done this with a few clients to wild success. The prescription was um, you must take a 10-minute shower every day. That's it. And just doing that created the space in their life that gave them the ability to have that rumination, to do the reflection, and to ask themselves those questions. Because in a shower, you're undistracted, right? Unless you've got a screen in your shower, which if you do, you shouldn't. Just protect your shower time, man.
I agree.
But
I agree.
but
Take it
just
down.
taking that time after a month of forcing yourself to do 10-minute showers every day, sure, you have a higher water bill, but what that does for you mentally, spiritually, and otherwise, and physically, right, to just relax, is amazing. It gives you that space to reflect and to ask those questions that Chris is proposing.
In my last role, professional role as CMO, I would share at, I think, somewhat appropriate times. Who knows when the appropriate time to share something like this is, with some of my colleagues, and I don't know that they actually understood what I was saying, but it was very true for me and has been and always has been. And I'm also saying this from a state where, like right now, I probably need some work to actually be still. Like I'm out of practice, right? So like if I were to actually go be still right now, I would be dealing with that tidal wave of like stuff before stillness comes. But there was a time, and not that long ago, where in order for me to be incredibly productive, and it's completely counterintuitive, I had to absolutely slow way down to go fast, right? It's like
Exactly,
you have to
exactly.
go way slow in order to actually kind of catapult yourself ahead.
That's right.
And it's completely counterintuitive. And even in the moments, you feel like
Yeah,
what am I doing? Like
yeah.
this is nuts. But it actually does actually work. And it's kind of a not, I was going to say somewhat magical. It actually feels like absolute magic.
It is, man. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah.
All right. So we've set up Polycrisis. We've set up what we're doing, creating communities where we've, been able to create them. You're also working on something called the Poly Opportunity.
Right.
And so I want to pivot into that, right? So there's this, and you've mentioned so many things. Like I've taken like incredible notes here, and I just want to like point out a few of these things. Like you were talking about, technology, and we wind up being in these, you didn't necessarily say echo chambers, but like you talk about being, the advent of technology and how great it's been, but there's also a lot of really terrible things about it too. And I'm taken back to the time where I heard Tristan Harris, take the TED stage, and he's, talking about what's happening in our tech and all of the kind of doom and gloom, right? And
Yeah.
the doom and gloom is necessary because we actually have to shine a light on it so we see it for what it is, so we can actually do something about it. And I think that doing something about it is what's encapsulated in like the Poly Opportunity. So can
Yeah.
you share a little bit about what that is? And
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so we believe, like you said, like, the headline is everything's getting better and everything's getting worse, right? And it's like, what do you do with that? Right? It's
exactly,
just like
I don't know what to
it's
do with
it's
it.
it's and that's the liminal space that we're kind of in between that, like, well, do I go in all in on everything's getting better, or do I go all in on everything's getting, it's like, well, you kind of have to stand in that tension of the paradox, and maybe both of those things are true simultaneously.
And humans hate that.
And humans hate that, and
Like
we're
the
not.
body does not really do really well
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of a state.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I mean, especially, Western civilization and post-Enlightenment thinking and modernity, we're very bad at non-binary thinking, right? So we're very Descartes, we're very mind-body, we're very binary, and that's just how we think. And so it does take practice to break free from that. Um, but that tension is really important. And so the poly opportunity is kind of about disrupting some of the prevailing stories, both in the doom and gloom side and on the everything's getting better side, right? We know that there's major catastrophic challenges, climate oriented. We know that economically, some of the challenges that we're facing are driving a lot of the social problems that we have today. So we know that these things are true, and we know that, like, we've learned some things. We've done some things really good. But the prevailing stories and the prevailing paradigms we've found to be on both sides pretty radically insufficient for ushering us through this time to get to the other side, right? And so the poly opportunity is really about bringing together through embodied personal convenings, smaller groups of people to collectively pursue what is the alternative narrative, right? The progress narrative isn't working for us anymore. We can't go back. That's definitely not going to work for us.
Right.
So what do we do? And that's what the poly opportunity is all about. And so we're bringing together some of the brightest minds in technology, in economics, in social philosophy, in climate science, in all sorts of things. We've got, people like Douglas Rushkoff, who's a media theorist who has written a ton on society and technology and AI. We have AI and indigenous knowledge scholars who are thinking about how do we cultivate AI and to be used as a wisdom tool. We've got people like John Fullerton from the Capital Institute coming to talk to us about regenerative economics and how could we create a economic system that actually is circular in the sense that it helps us to maintain prosperity and human flourishing that's not predicated on 3.5% growth every year globally speaking. So there's all sorts of kind of thorny, difficult conversations we're going to get into, but we're going to do it collectively as a community, and we're going to do it in person. We are creating a documentary film through the process to capture all the conversations that are happening. There'll probably be a book published out of this convening series. But also we know that relationships is critical, right? So one of our core tenets is that it's critical relationships, not critical mass, that moves mountains. And when you can bring like-minded people together who share a common value set as well as just a sense of purpose and passion for exploring the unexplored territory of what could be in our world, and they just meet serendipitously over lunch like Chris and I did, and that meeting sparks courageous action because they find their people who like, oh, you were the missing piece, you're who I've been looking for, let's go do this thing together, right? So we have a fundamental conviction that when you bring people together, relationships are formed and new emergent possibility, nothing that you could ever anticipate, will emerge from those new relationships. And maybe the team that's going to save the world is born out of one of these gatherings. Who knows? But we're doing our best to build the container to ensure that we're curating the right folks, that the conversations are well facilitated, that we're capturing it all, and that on the back end, we don't just come down from a mountaintop experience and say, well, that was fun and I met some interesting people, but
Right.
there's actual accountable follow-up, right, in perpetuity to this. So we're really trying to spark a movement of, finding, metabolizing, and applying the new narrative that's going to drive us forward.
Oh, that's fantastic. And as a part of that, Chris, where I want you to inject some beauty.
I will be injecting some beauty for sure. Logistically, the Poly opportunity is there are three core partners that are designing this and presenting it. The Holon Institute is one. We're in partnership with the House of Beautiful Business for this, and also the Acosta Institute, founded by Dr. Angel Acosta. There are going to be 4 events over 4 months on 4 continents. And I love the arc that has been built into this. You were asking earlier, what do we do? What can we do? And that is the question. And it is hard because our instinct is to move immediately into action or activism, and we don't even know what it is that we need to address.
Right.
And so the arc of the experiences, the first one is in Berlin, actually this coming weekend. And Berlin will be a moment of kind of hard truth-telling look at what is expiring, what actually is dying, what needs to be released. And let us be realistic about it, but also we can grieve it, but we need to celebrate it as we release it as well. We will literally go underground. There will be a rave that night, and we're gonna compost it into the earth and release it,
Wow, very
and
cool.
then come out the next morning and celebrate a birth. We don't know what is being birthed. We don't know what's coming forward, but all right, we're ready to welcome what is coming now. In the next month, in April, we're meeting at the Garrison Institute in the Hudson Valley in New York. It is an old monastery, and this event will be in many ways a liminal space. It is going to be a space of deep contemplation and listening for what wants to emerge, what wants to come forward. And it will be conversations, presentations, embodied experiences, art, theater, time in the woods for listening. But it will have that feeling of we need to be open our hearts and our minds, and be present for what is wanting to be called forward. The following month will be held in Tangier. This will be the largest of the events. There will be about 300 participants, and we will really be trying on a lot of radical ideas, trying on the tensions, trying on the possibilities, asking the big hard questions. And the second day will be all experiential. So we're getting our hands dirty and making and trying. From that, the final event will be in Tangier in June.
Istanbul.
Istanbul, thank you. And we're calling it our Istanbul Boot Camp. Finally,
Okay.
after 4 months, this will be the time that we will start moving into action. And as Joel said, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it's going to be or what's going to be seeded. It could be a movement. It could be a product. It could be an art installation. Who knows what's going to come out of it. But we're hoping to weave all of these events together, and the voices and the hopes and the openness to see what critical relationships have been created over those four events, and what is ready to emerge. And we'll see maybe the second half of this year or the years to come what is born from that.
Wow. That sounds very cool. How many attendees for each one? You said the one in Tangiers was going to be the largest at 300. Like, give me an idea about like.
I know that the Hudson Valley will be, I believe, about 100 people.
Okay.
And Joel,
Berlin will be 100. Yeah, Berlin will be. They're all 100 except for Tangier. Tangier will be 300. The rest will be about 100.
Wow, very cool.
And then there's also, we didn't mention an entire online component of this, that a lot of the online components will be actually free and open. We expect to have upwards of about 5,000 people across the year attend all the online events as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And where can folks find out more?
Thepolyopportunity.com.
Okay, cool. And why the polycrisis, poly opportunity? I have I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like poly, when I hear the word poly, my marketer hat goes on and I'm kind of like,
yeah.
what are you trying to say?
We like the provocation, right? Like it's like a little like, it's always kind of the
Yeah. Okay.
it's one of the things that Tim, founder of House of Beautiful Business, taught me many years ago when we worked together, about 10 or 12 years ago. He said if and he's a marketer as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said if what you have to say isn't disagreeable, it's not worth saying. And that's
Sure.
always stuck with me, right?
Yeah.
In branding and marketing, and I think that there's something, yeah, if there's something risque or there's something slightly toothy or something slightly,
Yeah.
right, I think it gets people's attention, and we do think that the nature of the world that we're moving into is a poly world, in the sense that it's going to be a world of many. There's
Mm.
not going to be a world of homogeny,
Right.
right? It's a world of diversity. It's a world of many answers to many problems, and that we need to proliferate the diversity of answers that we're testing and prototyping. And we need a diversity of people thinking about these things.
We do.
So yeah, there's a plurality that needs to be embraced and practiced in radical ways. So Polly gets at that.
Cool. That's awesome. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for having us, David. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Truly.
I'm curious if you think there's something specifically for your audience that you think might be of help. I mean, I think, I'm just assuming that your audience is primarily the folks who you are consulting with, but
Well, so that's an interesting question. Like when I started this podcast, it's an entirely personal podcast. Like I don't have monetization goals.
yeah,
And the person that I actually hold near and dear, like when I'm thinking about who's listening, is my mom.
mm-hmm.
And the reason it's my mom is because like my mom and I we've been very lucky in that we can share really deep things with each other, right? Philosophical things that, and which some people might find strange because, I grew up in a devout Mormon household. My mother was the bishop's wife, and I've talked on other episodes, like I'm obviously not a Mormon anymore. But like we still have those conversations, she and I, and there's a depth to our relationship that is pretty magical for me. But there's also things that it's safe space for us to explore, which means there's times where she says like, David, that sounds nuts. Like that sounds totally out there, right? Like I can't, and it's not from I can't mentally grasp it. She can mentally grasp it, but she's just wondering if there's something there to grasp, so.
Yeah.
But what's beautiful about that is we wind up in dialogue about things that are somewhat purposely amorphous.
Right.
They're supposed to feel like that. And so there's times where we wind up having conversations and it's just like, oh gosh, there's no period at the end of the sentence or the paragraph. This is a story that we're creating together, and there's intentionally no answers. And I think as human beings, sometimes there's a part of my mind and even personality that's just like, oh, I just need to find the answer. Once I have the answer, I'll be able to do something with the answer, which is all of this. We've been programmed in some ways, like once this happens, then you do this, then you turn it into action. And maybe that's a capitalist structure that's like, oh, you have to actually do something with it. And there are times where the action is no action. Like there's nothing to be done in that moment. Action sometimes can come years or even decades later. It's not something that needs to be finished. So I'm always kind of thinking about my mom there, which is why I asked some of the questions where it's like, okay, well, what's the practical application of some of this shit, right? Or it's like, okay, if someone's listening, and to me, like the practical application is if you haven't carved out time to be still, start there.
Yeah.
Because if you are not still, and I'm saying this, I feel like a hypocrite saying it right now, because the last time I've been still is like, it's been a minute. And, but that is the very thing that I think that we all need. You need to create some space. Because our modern lives and society are really amazing at filling it all up.
That's right. Yeah. And it's predicated, like value creation has been predicated on filling it up.
Both filling it up and numbing. Either you're so full that you're distracted, or we're numbing ourselves so we don't feel and you can't be present.
I mean, another reason why this podcast, I didn't realize it when I was making it, but like this is creating intentional space for me, where it's like I'm not creating. I'm creating something, but I'm not. There's not an end stated goal. It's like, oh, I'm making this so I can go do that. No, I'm just making. And my promise to my mom was, I'm just going to keep creating. And
Yeah.
whatever we create, but there's not like an end
Yeah.
goal. There's like a
Yeah.
little seed inside that needs to sprout and grow. And I'm just
That's
trying to
right.
figure out what it's going to be.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, so we talk about this as non-objective decision making, or and it's like well, let me back up a little bit because I think what you're talking about in terms of the relationship you have with your mom is actually a really beautiful analogy for this. In my mind, the question, what should I do, is the same question as who are you?
Mm,
Because essentially the action that you need to take is something that will be revealed to you in your pursuit of it, right?
yeah.
Now, if we've actually put a relational layer on that, the way that we come to know as something that's relationally, fundamentally, that you have to be still because you have to spend time with the thing you're getting to know. So if
Mm,
you want like getting to know your mom, right? You have this amazing, magical, wonderful relationship because you've spent the time in that space where you said like maybe there's not a period or maybe it doesn't land somewhere necessarily, or but you're able to go and explore the cracks and crevices and unopened rooms of your own stories and of your own worldviews and of what's happening around you. And in doing so, you have a knowledge of your mom that is uniquely and amazingly yours alone, right?
right.
Of her as a person.
That's right.
She has revealed herself to you. There's been a self-disclosure that has come with the time that you've spent with her that doesn't exist for anyone else. And so what I hear people saying when they're like, I need to know the thing or I want to know what to do, it's like, okay, do the work of wooing so that the self-disclosure happens. It will reveal itself to you if you sit with the thing, right?
Mm,
That's why take a 10-minute shower is such a profound yet dumb, simple piece of
yeah.
advice,
It's great though.
because it's like you need to just go spend time with it. Like start dating the thing that you don't know what it is yet, but you got to get to know it. Like it's never going to open the curtain if it doesn't trust you. And so for that thing to trust you to disclose itself to you as the thing that you need, which is the knowledge or the action or the whatever it is, you gotta have a relationship with it. It has to,
Yeah.
you gotta build that. So I think that the um, all of that is that's the philosophy of an epistemologist named Esther Meek, who built on the work of Michael Polanyi, who's a 20th century epistemologist. And the whole thing is that like knowledge has personhood, right? That like it's a coming that you come to know through relationship with what you're coming to know. So it's they call it covenant epistemology, and it's a really beautiful thing of like, oh, and like how does that change too also the way that we steward our knowledge or that we steward the action. This is something that has been gifted to me through the self-disclosure of the universe. I'm going to now carry this knowledge or action with a newfound respect and dignity. It's not something to be owned or weaponized or,
Right.
whatever, right? It's something to be lived with in relationship. And like all relationships, they change over time. So maybe the thing that I know right now is not going to be the thing that I know in 10 years. It might look radically different. Um, I'll be different. The thing will be different, right?
Thank you. It's good to
Yeah,
speak
thank
to
you.
you.
Good.
Thanks for listening to Coded in Gold. I've been your host, David Newsom. If you like the show, please leave us a review. I'd also love to know what you want to hear about next and any guests you think I should talk to. Next week, I'm sitting down with Nick Little, a teacher who I had an eye-opening conversation with about the state of education today. You don't want to miss it. You can follow Coded in Gold on our socials for updates on upcoming episodes. Links are in our show notes. Thank you and take care.